Hi everybody, it's Laura. Thank you so much for joining me on my channel. Today I have a layout that I made for the August Stamp It Like It's Hot challenge. For this hop, we have a stamp-related prompt each month where we try out some different stamping techniques. And this month, the prompt was stamp and color. And this video should have come out on Saturday, but I have to apologize to you and to the ladies of Stamp It Like It's Hot that I did not get this video out in time. I had my layout all ready to go, and when I went to make my video, I was away on a weekend crop and I realized I did not have the attachment that I needed in order to get the videos from my device onto my computer, so I'm very sorry about that. Unfortunately, there was no way I could get the attachment that I needed when I was away, but here is my video. So I started out with some really pretty stamps that I bought from Close to My Heart when they were going out of business. They sent an email and they had lots of great items on sale, and this is a stamp and die set. I didn't use the dies for this layout, I just used the stamps, and this stamp set is called Isabella. There are a number of different flowers in this set. There are also some flowers with some lemons, and there are some leaves. So what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get as crisp of an image as I possibly can. I'm using some Stays On ink in jet black, and I have my stamping foam underneath my paper. I'm stamping on a piece of smooth white 80-pound cardstock. I am trying to leave the stamp on the page for a few seconds so that the ink will transfer from the stamp to the paper. And I'm also trying to rock the stamp just a tiny little bit because I don't want to make the images blurry. There is one blurry flower, so I'm not going to color that one in. And there's also an image that didn't stamp enough. There wasn't enough ink on the stamp, or I didn't press hard enough. That's the one to the left. So I decided to use that image to try out some markers. When I saw the prompt stamp and color, I was thinking that I should use something like either markers or colored pencils, mainly because I feel like painting is still coloring something, but it's not quite the same thing. So I tried out some alcohol markers, but they immediately smeared the Stays On ink. I don't think I've ever used those markers to color in a stamped image before, so I'm not sure if that's something I did wrong, or maybe I didn't wait for the ink to dry. But anyway, I decided instead to use some colored pencils. So I'm using these Prismacolor colored pencils, and I am using 3 different shades of pink to color in the flowers. I'm starting with the lightest shade, and then I go to the medium shade, and I'm adding a little bit of extra color all along the lines and wherever I think that the flower might have some shade on it. So I'm coloring along the edges of the petals, I'm coloring in the center of the flower, and putting a little bit of extra color in those places just so that they would look realistic. There were also a number of lemons on these images, and I think that yellow is a great combination to use with pink and green. So I colored in those lemons as well, using a couple of different colors of yellow. And I tried to leave a small area on each of the lemons that was either not colored in at all or just slightly colored in so that the lemons would have a highlight on them. I'm also coloring the leaves in with green, and again, I'm using a couple of different shades of green. I cover the majority of the leaf with the lightest color, and then I go back in along the stamped lines and then also along the center because I think those would be the darkest parts on an actual leaf. To try to make the flowers look a little bit more colorful and also a little bit more dimensional, I went back in with that darkest shade of pink. It was a really bright color, and I think that it added a nice touch to the flowers. So I added some more of that, especially along the edges of the petals and in the centers of the flowers. So now I've colored in all of the images on this sheet except for 2 that didn't stamp so well. And then I'm using my little tiny Martha Stewart fussy cutting scissors, and I'm fussy cutting out all of these images. You could see that off to the right I had stamped and colored in a few more images, but I didn't want to include all of the footage or this would be an extremely long video. And this is just the reason that I wanted to join this hop. I don't think I ever would have stamped and colored in these images with colored pencils if I wasn't taking part in this challenge. I have really learned that stamps are a really wonderful tool to use on layouts, and I have to break out my stamps a little bit more often. This is a photo of both of my daughters, who are the subjects of most of my layouts. I was at a crop and I brought a Simple Stories collection to use with these flowers because I thought it went so well, but I didn't end up using that collection. There's a table that people can resell some of their older scrapbooking supplies at this crop, and I found a whole bunch of pattern papers, and I thought that this wood background would be a nice complement for these flowers as well, so I decided to use that. And then I picked up a couple more papers that read like solids, but I liked them because they had a little bit of texture and variation to them. So I used a 4-inch strip of green on the right-hand side of the layout, and then I matted my photo with some white cardstock and again with a blue pattern paper. And you'd have to look really carefully to tell, but the blue paper has some variation in it too, and that's why I picked up those papers. I love to have papers that look like solids, but they are not totally solid. I think that makes a layout so much more interesting. So now I have my photo mounted on my page, and I'm going to start embellishing with all of those flowers and lemons that I had stamped and cut out. I'm arranging those flowers and putting them around the photo. I'm going to have 2 clusters, and then I'm going to have a 3rd cluster in the lower left-hand corner. Now, I told you that I picked out a Simple Stories collection and I didn't end up using it. I didn't use the pattern papers, but I did end up using a number of embellishments. So I had this tag that says, "Life is so lovely," so I thought that I would include that as the title. And then I arranged the flowers all around the tag, and I decided I was going to attach that tag right down to the layout. I was pretty happy with the way the flowers and the tag were arranged, so I started to attach the flowers down as well. Usually it takes me a little bit of time before I feel like I am ready to commit to attaching elements like this down, but I also didn't want to lose this arrangement that I had placed down, so I decided to just get it attached down to the page. And I don't know the manufacturer of this piece of wood grain pattern paper that I used. It's one of those really thin pieces of paper, not like the cardstock, but that really, really thin paper that sometimes comes in those pads that have like 180 sheets in them. So when I was all done with the layout, I ended up attaching down another piece of cardstock behind it because I don't like when my layouts are really, really flimsy. I like them to have a little bit of thickness to them. So I do that later on though. The name of the Simple Stories collection that I'm using some embellishments from is the Simple Vintage Spring Garden collection. I initially got this in a My Creative Scrapbook kit, and I loved it so much that I bought another collection, and I had a number of papers and also the sticker sheet, although I am not going to use, as I mentioned, the papers on this page, but I do use a few embellishments and a number of stickers. When I was stamping, I stamped a whole bunch of leaves because I feel like sometimes I think I'm only going to use a few and I end up using lots and lots of leaves. So I did stamp a lot of them and I wanted to use more of them in my clusters. So I tuck a number of leaves into all the different clusters, just trying to look for gaps or spots that look like they needed a little bit of something extra. So I used quite a few of those leaves. I think I ended up having 1 leaf left at the end. I used my ATG adhesive to attach down all of the elements on the page. The photo that I'm using is of both of my daughters in Rochester, New York. My older daughter, Danielle, used to go to school there, and she loved this place. It was called Tai Chi, and they had something called a sushi burrito, and I had to admit they were really delicious, but that was the one and only time I ever had one of those, and this photo was taken in 2019. And it turns out a sushi burrito has nothing to do really with burritos other than the size and shape of the wrap that they're in, but it tastes a lot like a huge piece of sushi. So if you like sushi, you would definitely like a sushi burrito. But I just found out that a location of this restaurant called Tai Chi has opened up in a mall right near me. So I'm looking forward to trying another one soon. I used the sticker sheet that I had that matched with this collection to pull off a couple of elements. I found there were a number of beads, so I thought that those would look nice in each of the clusters. And then there was this green scallop, and I decided that I could put this along the border of the green paper on my layout. First, I'm inking it with some Distress ink in Vintage Photo. And I just added the sticker where I knew it would be visible. That way I didn't have to pull all of my embellishments and my photo off of the page. And then I do end up using that little bit of the scallop that's left over on another part of the page. But for right now, I just put it aside because I couldn't decide whether or not I wanted to include it. In addition to including some bees, I also wanted to include a few butterflies on the page. All of these elements had a white border around them. And I like white borders in some circumstances, but I didn't think that it was necessary on this layout. So I'm going to go back and fussy cut all of the white borders off with my scissors. I cut them off of the butterflies, and I also cut them off of those little bee stickers. And then I ink the edges of them, and then I put them back in place. Sometimes that white border comes in really handy for making the embellishment contrast with the background, but I didn't think it was necessary on this page. I think that the embellishments show up just fine without the white border. I didn't want the blue mat behind the photo to be the only place on the layout that had that color blue. And I found that I had a number of blue butterflies, so I was thinking that would be the perfect addition to the page. But initially I had planned on using a few of them, but then because they're side facing, they're a little bit harder to use than the other butterflies that I have on the page. So I decided to just include the one butterfly by the tag. And I think that just with that one butterfly, it helps to even out the color. I also added some sentiments toward the bottom of the page. The first one, happy, is that same blue color. I also added such a lovely moment and I love you. And I staggered them a little bit just to give them a little bit of interest. And then on top of the photo, I had a little ephemera piece that says live simply. So I added that to the top of the photo. And then I wanted to add some photo corners, one of my favorite things to add. And I used my favorite EK Success photo quarter punch. And I punched out some photo corners from some blue pattern paper. And then I attached them down just in two corners because the other corners are covered by flowers. And for the sentiment that I added over the photo, I cut the border off of that and I inked the edges of that before attaching it down, just so it would go along with the other embellishments on the page. And I also added a green heart to that sentiment, but I'm going to end up switching that out for a different color heart. Now I'm adding some pearls to some of the embellishments. I add them to the photo corners. I add them to the centers of the butterflies and also to the centers of all of the hearts. This is where I decided that I was going to switch the green heart out for a pink one. I just thought pink would be a little bit more visible there. And since I had a few more leaves, I decided I was going to incorporate those onto the layout. And I added those in a couple of places to fill out the clusters. And then I added a small heart, very similar to the one I added to the sentiment at the top of the page, to the tag. And then my friend Sue was nice enough to give me this beautiful green ribbon that I think goes really nicely with the colors on the page. And it's a very good thing that she had that bow available because I didn't have anything else to put on that tag. And I always like to have something at the top of a tag. Often when I have a really colorful layout like this, I like to add elements that break up the color to some extent. So I borrowed a die from my friend Sue. Once again, this was a Crafter's Companion winter set. And I thought that this branch would be perfect to add to each of the clusters. So I cut quite a few out and then I tucked them right behind the flowers and the leaves that were in my clusters that I had on the layout. And in some cases I'm using the whole die cut, but most of the time I cut a little bit off the bottom just so that they wouldn't be super long. And I should have said this earlier, but I'm very sorry about the glare that's on the photo. And unfortunately, I don't even realize there's a reflection until later on when I watch the video. And those branches are the very last touch that I add to this layout. And this layout is complete. And here are some close-ups. Thank you so much for watching, everybody. I really appreciate it, and I really hope that you enjoyed watching this video. I know that I'm really enjoying using more stamping on my scrapbooking layouts. I often use it in the background, but now I am realizing that I have to start using my stamps for more prominent elements on my page. I highly recommend that you check out the Stamp It Like It's Hot playlist. The link is in the description box. There are lots of very talented ladies making gorgeous layouts with their stamps. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for being a part of my scrapbooking journey and for supporting my channel. I hope you have a fantastic day, and I'll see you again soon. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.